So we're going to talk about how to write powerfully in defense of liberty. Who here is interested in being a writer? Who here is already publishing writing? Awesome. And how many people, let's see, how many people have some ideas for articles that you've gotten just from being at this conference? Please. Everyone that wants to be a writer should be raising their hands. We'll talk more about why as we dive in. So obviously today it's pretty bleak for us freedom fighters. If we look around the world, there is a mass amount of pressure against liberty. But we have cause for optimism because we know that people have spearheaded revolutions in the past. They've pushed for liberty and they've won. And in fact, there are some people that are doing it pretty well today already. So we have some examples of success that we can look to and learn from. Our goal as defenders of liberty, I'm going to move pretty fast because we started like 10 minutes late, so apologize for that, but I'm available for questions in my emails at the end here. So our goal as defenders of liberty is, as I would put it, to attract people toward pro-liberty positions by clearly showing how those positions support their life-serving values and aspirations. And I think every word of that purpose is meaningful and is there for a reason. And we're going to get more into why, but the attract and to do so clearly are extremely important. How are we going to attract people to liberty? Well, if you look around at the typical pro-liberty persuasion, it's very, very focused on negatives, but I don't think that much of it is actually very persuasive, right? I think that one of the first things that we need to do as writers in defense of liberty is define a positive vision to fight for. If we think about it, liberty is the absence of a negative, right? We don't have somebody else interfering with our lives and telling us what to do. But that doesn't leave us with a whole lot of positive vision to fight for, a whole lot of motivation. I love these quotes. That's how we're going to win. So if you guys remember Star Wars: The Last Jedi, the last few rebels are behind this blast door, and the First Order is encroaching on them. And it's pretty clear that if they don't do something, they're all going to die. So they hop into their dilapidated speeders. A few of them ride out to take on what is overwhelming opposition. And most of them die pretty quickly. A few are left. I believe Finn is the character. He's got a clear shot. He's the only one with a clear shot, but his guns go out. So what's he going to do? He's going to sacrifice himself by plowing into the Imperial cannon. And Rose, another character who we get the impression she kind of loves him, sees what's going on, and she drives her speeder into his and keeps him from sacrificing his life. And he says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "That's how we're going to win." Or she says, "That's how we're going to win. Not fighting what we hate, saving what we love." Now, you could say, for instance, we New Hampshireites like to say, "Live free or die. Death is not the worst of evils." And often it does make sense to sacrifice your life for the cause of liberty. But I think there's something really profoundly true about this quote, and Rand captures the same idea when she says, we cannot fight against anything unless we fight for something. So each of us has to define some positive vision that we really want to see achieved in the world, because this is the thing that's going to keep us motivated to push through the very difficult process of writing, to figure out what it is that people believe, why they believe it, and how we can move them in the right direction. If we don't have something positive motivating us, it's going to be a drag. It's going to be awful. We're going to be pushing ourselves to do it out of a sense of duty instead of out of a sense of love for the thing that we want to achieve. So whatever it is, if you want to see people living healthy, recreational lives, if you want to see man conquering space, if you want to see a future of nuclear power, or just everybody being wealthy enough to just live incredible lives and design those lives however they see fit, figure out what it is that really motivates you and use that as your motivation. not, oh, we've got to get rid of these people that are doing all these terrible things to us. Along with this, we have to consider the fact that we're vying for people's attention with literally every other stimulus that they could possibly, that we can possibly imagine. So we really need to break through the noise. And we can't do that by just shouting fire all the time. I mean, people are going to tune that stuff out. And I'll talk more about, I don't know if you guys heard Anthony Davies talk about how we love terrible things, right? I want to talk more about that. So how do we break through the noise? Well, one of the things that we need to get good at is telling stories, right? Countless people that I've talked to have been brought into the Liberty movement by Atlas Shrugged, by 1984, by fiction. And fiction, fiction obviously it's all about story, but whether we're writing fiction or nonfiction, we can actually leverage the techniques of great storytellers. Because if you think about it, people spend hours upon hours of their lives reading about things that actually never happened and characters that actually don't exist. Why? There's something intrinsically motivating. There's something inherently compelling pulling them into that. Story, action, right? So how do we leverage that? Is it just that people are pulled to negatives all the time? This is what they want. I don't think so. Actually, I think that if you look at evolution, if you just look at biology, it's pretty clear that we evolved to pay a lot of attention to action, because action is incredibly important to our lives. Things moving in our environment, we immediately, somebody opens the door, everybody turns to see what's going on back there. You know, is somebody going to walk in with a gun? What's going to happen? So we're I don't want to say programmed because I'm not a determinist, but in a sense we're very cued into action. And so we need to spotlight action when we're writing, especially when we're trying to hook people. And we need to use the techniques of storytellers to do that effectively. So this ties into what I said our goal was, right? To attract people toward pro-liberty positions by clearly showing how those positions support their life-serving values and aspirations. Now consider some typical pro-liberty persuasion. It is the purpose of this essay to analyze the problems of government interference in business from the economic standpoint. The political and social consequences of the policy of interventionism can only be understood and judged on the basis of an understanding of its economic implications and effects. Opening lines of Mises's Interventionism. Great book, not a great example of what I'm talking about, right? How many people, unless you're already interested in economics, feel some pull to go read the rest of this book? I've got to know how this ends, right? I don't think too many. So Mises is focusing here on fighting against a disvalue, right? What if he instead focused primarily on fighting for a value? This is one of the things that we talk about all the time at the Objective Standard, where I'm an editor, and at Objective Standard Institute. Meeting people at their values. What do people care about, right? So this doesn't exist, but this is my attempt at rewriting Mises' first paragraph, pardon the hubris. We live in a world of such wealth and opportunity that our ancestors could scarcely have imagined it. What has made mankind's tremendous progress possible, and why isn't such progress universal? How can we protect our incredible standards of living and ensure that they don't slide backward? And then instead of calling it interventionism, which is a focus on a negative, the engine of progress. That sounds interesting. One more example. This year, federal, state, and local governments will spend more than $1 trillion to fund more than 100 separate anti-poverty programs. In fact, since LBJ declared war on poverty 52 years ago, anti-poverty programs have cost us more than $23 trillion. That's a huge sum of money by any measure. Opening lines of Michael Tanner's book, The Inclusive Economy. I don't need to state the obvious there, right? But if we rewrite this, America was once home to a political economic system that left hardworking people free to achieve their dreams. That system has been compromised but with the right ideas and policies, we can resurrect it. So I'm not claiming this is poetry or anything, or this is a great example of something that's going to hook somebody. This isn't much of a story, so it's not actually concretizing all the principles I'm putting on the table here. But you get the idea. I'm focusing on a positive. So that's principle number 1. Define some positive vision to fight for, something that motivates you. If you are passionate about it, chances are that you can make other people passionate about that too, right? Principle number 2, always be writing. This is why I asked at the outset how many people have ideas for stories. I think that if you want to be a writer, you have to always be writing. So this is our version of always be shipping or always be closing, right? We have to always be writing. A couple quotes here. There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you, Maya Angelou. I have to admit that these are from one of those wiki quotes sites, and I usually don't trust those, and I didn't go check these, but I think they might be real quotes. Anyway, I thought I should mention that. Another, lock up your libraries if you like, but there is no gate, no lock, no bolt that you can set upon the freedom of my mind. To always be writing. If you think about it, we writers are kind of like inventors. We always have to be creating a new product, right? It's not that we can create the iPhone and then just figure out how to sell 10 million of them. I mean, that's part of it, right? But realistically, if we're writers, then we're always creating a new product. We have to constantly be coming up with new ideas and figuring out how to test them, see what works, see how to become better at it. One great way to do that, by the way, is just come up with your theme sentence, something that's really intriguing, that captures the idea that you want to convey to people, and put that on Twitter and just see what happens. Now, I'm not a great example of this because I have a terrible Twitter following, and to be honest, I just so loathe being on social media that I haven't really cultivated it. But do what I say, not as I do on this one, okay? And if we're always writing, we're always coming up with new ideas, things that we want to convey to the world, we're going to need some kind of file system. I knew an amazing writer. He's a constitutional lawyer. He's a genius. I don't know how he does what he does. And I asked him about his writing system. And he talked about how basically he's got all these files, not physical files, files on his computer, I presume. I didn't actually ask him. Maybe he does have physical files. But anyway, he's constantly taking notes on subjects that he's interested about every day, adding to the stockpile that he has. And then a news hook comes out, something happens, and that information becomes immediately relevant, and he can turn that into an amazingly well-researched, thorough article in very, very short amount of time. So we want to adopt something like this. We want to always be writing. I recommend, just as a concrete example, a concrete recommendation here, I really like the application Scrivener. It keeps me super organized. I will start a Scrivener project on a particular topic, and then I can just keep adding to it, and I can rearrange and hierarchize my notes. I can put stuff on a corkboard like this. So I recommend it. I'm not sponsored by them. I don't make any money if you guys download it. I think it's like $50, so it's not free, but it's helped me immensely. It's definitely made me a better writer. Another very concrete recommendation on this stuff, if you're always going to be writing, you're going to find that you're going to have you're going to work out your own methods for doing things. One of the things that I love to do is to take my phone and go for a walk. And my neighbors probably think I'm crazy. I'm the guy that walks all the time with his phone. And I just dictate notes into it, and I just sort of tell stories and make points the way that I would if I were talking to a friend over a cup of coffee, right? And that just makes it a very conversational way to get these ideas out. It makes it much easier. It takes the bar way down. I feel like a lot of people, especially new writers, when they go to write, they kind of approach writing as if it's this monumental thing and it's so important, and what ends up happening is that they put so much pressure on themselves to sound smart that it's completely unclear what comes out, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So take that pressure off, just go for a walk. You know, Aristotle was known as the peripatetic philosopher, right? Because he was always walking, like he taught his classes while walking around. And I feel like, me personally, I definitely think a lot better, which is why I tend to move so much while I'm up here. Sorry about that. So principle number 2 is always be writing. Like, make it your goal to leave here with like at least 5 ideas. I took probably 10 ideas just out of the conversation with John Mackey the other day. And Anthony Davies, I mean, he gave us probably 25 topics because he talked about all these things that the news doesn't talk about. Now, there's a trick there, and it's figuring out how to make that stuff sexy and clickable, right? But I think it's doable. Principle number 3, take the moral high ground. I've got a friend, he's an economist, George Mason University economist, and after the lockdowns, you know, all these anti-price gouging laws were in effect to keep people from buying so much toilet paper. Oh no! Well, actually, sorry, it's the other way around. To keep prices, to keep the grocery stores from raising their prices in consequence of the fact that demand had risen. Right? So they want to say, like, no, economics don't work the way that you do. Stop supply and demand. No, we want to keep the prices where they are so that, like, grandma down the street can afford the toilet paper too, and not just, like, the rich guy in the mansion. And so anyway, he circulated a petition and got signatures from something on the order of, like, 300 or 400 PhD economists. And it was to get rid of the anti-price gouging laws. And they're basically saying, like, look, this is basic economics. It doesn't work. Stop doing this. You're actually causing the shortages because people are overbuying because the price hasn't gone up, you know, in consequence of the fact that demand has. And he got some traction, actually. Somebody at the Wall Street Journal was thinking about running a story about it, which would have been huge. It might have actually done something in the culture if that had happened. But the person there at Wall Street Journal asked, but doesn't this mean that grandma down the street won't be able to afford this stuff? And isn't that immoral if poor people can't afford this stuff? And he didn't have a worked out, fully baked answer to the moral question on this. And so they passed on it, and the petition might have gotten picked up by a few local papers here and there, but it really just kind of petered out because he didn't make a moral case for it. So if we think about liberty and the people that have persuaded large amounts of people to follow them for the cause of liberty, they're not, the founding fathers were not saying, look, you know, all these taxes you're putting on tea and paper and stuff, it's really causing this wonky economic situation for us, which is terrible. No, they made a moral case for rights, right? That's how they won. That's how they won for freedom. John Adams. What do we mean by the American Revolution? Do we mean the American War? The Revolution was effected before the war commenced. The Revolution was in the minds and hearts of the people. They won hearts and minds by making a moral case for freedom. Same thing with the abolitionist movement. They took the moral high ground. They didn't just say, look, you know, slavery actually causes really bad products because, you know, the slaves don't really care that much, and if you just paid them, they'd take the initiative to do better. They didn't make practical arguments about this. I mean, not that practical arguments hurt, but you have to make the moral case too, because if you don't, people are not motivated to do something that they think is practical but immoral. No one's going to do that. You're not going to sell anybody on, hey, let's do something practical but immoral. Von Mises actually recognized this in one of his early papers. I think it was Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth. He made this long economic argument about the fact that, you know, socialism doesn't work because there's no economic calculation that's possible. And then he basically ends by concluding this: the knowledge of the fact that rational economic activity is impossible in a socialist commonwealth cannot, of course, be used as an argument either for or against socialism. The practical argument cannot be used as an argument either for or against socialism, because whoever has prepared himself to enter upon socialism on ethical grounds, whoever is guided by ascetic ideals and his desire for socialism, will not allow himself to be influenced in his endeavors by what we have said. In other words, yeah, we've made a practical argument, but people who are committed to socialism on moral grounds are not going to be persuaded by this. And Rand called out the economists, and specifically Mises in this quote. I think this was a letter to Leonard Read in 1946. And this is regarding von Mises's book, Omnipotent Government, but the idea is the same. She said, "The great mistake is in assuming that economics is a science which can be isolated from moral, philosophical, and political principles, and considered as a subject in itself without relation to them. It can't be done. The best example of that is von Mises's Omnipotent Government. That is precisely what he attempted to do in a very objective, conscientious, scholarly way. And he failed dismally, even though his economic facts and conclusions were for the most part unimpeachable. He failed to present a convincing case because at the crucial points where his economics comes to touch upon moral issues, as all economics must, he went into thin air, into contradictions, into nonsense. He did prove all right that collective economics don't work, and he failed to convert a single collectivist." Rand, on the other hand, has convinced a lot of people to join the liberty movement. Her Atlas Shrugged was ranked the second most influential novel of all time by polls here in the US, second to only the Bible in terms of influential books. And even von Mises recognized toward the end, later on, after Atlas Shrugged came out, the importance of pointing out these moral points. He wrote this letter to Rand after he read the book in 1958. And he said, "But Atlas Shrugged is not merely a novel. It is also, or may I say, first of all, a cogent analysis of the evils that plague our society, a substantiated rejection of the ideology of our self-styled intellectuals, and a pitiless unmasking of the insincerity of the policies adopted by governments and political parties. It is a devastating exposure of the moral cannibal." So you can see he's recognizing Rand's moral case for capitalism and the power that that case has. And there's a whole lot more of that in Rand's book, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. So that's principle number 3, take the moral high ground. There's a whole lot more that I could say about writing. I think we're already over time. But if you want a free ebook on this, 7 Steps for Writing in Defense of Liberty, in Defense of Freedom, go to objectivestandard.org/writing or objectivestandard.org/writing ebook. If you go to the second one, you can get the link for this ebook for free. And it'll also put you on a mailing list to get notified when I start my next writing course. I do a whole 4-week course on this topic. We go to a lot more detail and talk about a lot more different aspects of this. And I'd love to see some of you guys in there. We have course brochures up here. I've also got a little book that I co-wrote with a friend of mine, Craig Biddle, and that book is not related to writing, but it's pretty cool. It's on creating a meaningful life. It's on purpose and how to cultivate purpose in your life. But just as a recap of what we covered here, how to write powerfully in defense of liberty, I covered define a positive vision, something to fight for, something to motivate you, and to motivate others and to attract them toward liberty. Always be writing. It's our version of always be closing. We have to always be taking notes and thinking on paper. And take the moral high ground. Need to make the moral case for capitalism, not just the practical case. Awesome. Thank you, guys.